So for this section, we're going to be adding tessellation to our landscape. So I want you to go in and we're going to look at the dirt layer that we have going at the moment. Before we do though, I want you to get a good idea of what happens if I bring the camera down to ground level. At the moment, even though this looks kind of interesting, as we get close, you can see that it's just a flat surface. For what we're about to do, I need you to open up the dirt layer. So I'm going to go to ML Dirt. And from in here, we're going to start looking at how to add tessellation. Now to do this, what we need to do is actually modify a world displacement within ML Dirt. Now I'm going to warn you that what we're about to do has a fair bit of overhead. So be aware that if you're going to do it, you need to really actually want to do it. Don't just kind of throw it in there and assume it'll be fine. That said, it is easy to turn off if it is something that is going to be too much overhead for your game and you only discover that in the long run. But just keep it in mind that this is kind of costly as we do it. So initially we have this output material blended that's pushing out to our landscape material, right? And we're also pushing out a height map here, which is a rough idea of like where the rocks are and where the dirt is to control the overall height. Now we can use this and we can leverage off of this to add tessellation to this. And specifically, the section of tessellation that we're going to be working with is world displacement. So to do that, what I need to do is when we have this blend material attributes over here, I'm going to drag off of that and I'm going to add a set material attributes node. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add world displacement. At which point I'm going to plug this into here. Now, when we add world displacement, you need to remember that we don't just add a height to each section. We need to add a height and a direction. So to do that, what we need to do is get the height that we've already worked out. We multiply that by the vertex normal of the world. So I'm going to type in vertex normal. Now, the vertex normal is essentially a direction. So if I was to look at this, you could see that there's only blue in the top half because that's pointing upwards. Whereas on the bottom half, there's no blue because it'd be a negative value because it's pointing downwards, because blue represents the z-axis. So by multiplying a direction against the height, we're effectively giving a direction distance. So it's saying push it that far out in that direction because the height value, if the height's 0, it means push it 0 values in that direction. If the height's equal to 1, it'll mean push it 1 in that direction. And I can multiply this against any number to kind of control how far it's going to push out. So if I was to multiply this number by 5, for instance, that's now going to push out a pure white value in our height map by 5 centimeters. So to do this, I'm just going to plug this into here. At which point, I'm going to have to make one other change before we see the effect. So I've applied this, and I'm now going to open up the landscape material. And I'm just going to go down my landscape material, and you'll see that there's a section that says no tessellation. Instead, set that to PN triangles. Hit apply. And now I'm going to look at this in the world. This is going to take a little longer to build. And again, this does add overhead, so it also takes a little longer to compile. But when it pops in, what we should be seeing here is, if I bring myself closer to the ground, do you see how this ground is now actually 3D? Wherever the height map was, it's now pushing those pixels up. And if I look at it from here, it actually has a whole lot more depth to it, because all of this dirt kind of far more nicely like sticks out and has some realism to it. So we want to do this for not just the ground, we also want to do it for the grass as well. But before we do, we need to remember one thing. If I go into wireframe mode, you can see the tessellation kicking in. See these extra polygons that have been spliced in? As I move away, those polygons are removed, but as I'm close, they're in there. So for this kind of thing, what we actually want to do is we want to control how these are, like how far away it is before it starts splicing in additional polygons. Because if I move forward slowly, do you see we have that effect of them shimmering as they kind of pop in? The reason for that is that if I go to here, you can see the polygons are getting more dense as they're getting into our field of view. So how we can fix this is we can tell this to do a blend further away between our two materials, and at that point we want to increase or decrease the tessellation multiplier. So what I'm going to have here is, initially I'm going to go to my landscape and I'm going to set this blend to be from 2000, and I'm just going to push it up to about 3000. I'm also going to tell it to be slightly further away, so I'm going to go from 1500 to say 1750. Now I'm going to apply that. There we go. And if I move forward, it's still there. It's still there, and it's a bit better, but it's still not great. But that's okay, because there's one other fix that we can bring in to kind of fix it a bit. And that is that at the moment we're outputting to world displacement. But in this set material attributes, I'm going to add another category, which is going to be called tessellation multiplier. So for tessellation multiplier, which is there, what we need to do is we need to tell this essentially that when we're close, really tessellate it. When we're far away, don't tessellate it that much at all. So it's up to us how we want to handle that, but I find that the nicest way is actually to leverage off of this distance blend that we already have being read in. And if I get that distance blend and I increase the contrast, so a power of 3 would do. So I'm going to look at this, and you can see that it's black, it's black, it's black, and then as I get farther away, it'll do this. When we're up close and it's a value that's black, what I want to do is I want to lerp. So I'm going to drop in a linear interpolate by hitting L and left clicking. Alternatively, I can type in the word linear and grab it from there. I'm going to connect this to the alpha, and I'm just going to plug this into my tessellation multiplier. And the values that I'm going to set here are going to be, when you're quite close, do a multiplier of 2. Initially, let's try a value of 0 and see how that goes on for the white values. So I've hit apply, now I'll wait. Okay, here we go, it's just popping in. And the ground around us now has a higher tessellation factor as well, because we've pushed it up to 2. So it's a little less noticeable, but it might be worthwhile us just changing that to 1 after all. So I'm going to go between 2 and 1. And I'm just going to build one last time. Significantly harder to notice in the distance now, and we're only able to spot it at all because it's on a flat surface. If this had even like a bit of hills and stuff going, it would be substantially harder to really notice, so I'll move over here. So yeah, it's pretty tricky to notice, and if I come down to the ground, we've got some actual 3D like depth, so they're occluding themselves. So it looks quite nice. And it works reasonably well. So the next thing we're going to do is quickly add this to our grass as well. So I'm going to go to ML Dirt, and I'm just going to copy the set materials, the multiply, the normal, as well as this power and lerp. So you should have these nodes here. I'm going to Control C, quickly go into the grass, and just after everything, paste. And if you remember, we're running the material attributes into the set. And this multiply here plugs into the height. And this power plugs into the distance. I'm going to click apply, and we'll just have a quick test to see how that goes. Can't remember where my grass was in the map, so I'm just going to zoom out for a second until I can see it. So there's my grass over here. So we can see it's working there as well. It's not quite as smooth as we would really like it though for this grass. Ideally this grass would be in large chunks that were up, and then every now and then it dips down. So for us to do that, there's an extra operation that we can really do. So this height is currently outputting a value between 0 and 1 to here. And in the same way before that we multiplied it and then increased the contrast, we could actually just do that one extra time to get something that might look a little bit better. So I'm going to multiply this by a higher number, say 3. And after we've multiplied it by 3, I'm just going to clamp it. Now I should probably increase the contrast in the process, but to begin with I'll just clamp it. It's a little bit better. Still not great though. I might actually turn this up substantially then. So get the multiply by 5. I'll increase the power to just still get those drops occasionally. If you really want to see what this is looking like, you can always turn off the UVs here and reactivate them afterwards. So I'm trying to get more of kind of a blanket white for the tessellation that then every now and then drops back. Actually 5 should be alright. And the thing that I'm also going to do here is instead of pushing it out by 5, I'm only going to push it out by 3. I'm now going to reconnect these UVs, just because it's a bit easier to see. Apply, save. And this should be right. So after this, what we're going to be working on is foliage. And that's going to be one of the things that really brings out the life in your landscapes. So, quickly, just drop this in. That looks substantially nicer. It's got a little bit of like a depth to it. Works reasonably well. And it cleanly blends between the dirt and the grass. So the height kind of pops out depending on which layer it is. You can see the little pebbles in the distance, whereas this is kind of the block. So that works quite well. So next up we'll be doing foliage, which is automatically added by the landscape. And then after that lesson, we'll be doing the foliage painting.